This is the Money Mike Syndicated Radio Podcast and the WNBA. It's official. Candace Parker, Unrivaled. They're coming your way. It's a changing of the game, and the game will never be the same. And I'm bringing it to you. Gino, Unrivaled, WNBA competition. It's official. It's official, and it's been announced. And it took Candace Parker to take the stage and let everybody know that we're here to compete with the WNBA. The Unrivaled League is not a league that you're building for the sake of additional or part time extra work. The Unrivaled League is here to compete with the WNBA. And if it means the competition takes down the WNBA, that's what it is, and that's what the players are feeling. This one finally came out of the bag. As I've been telling everybody, the WNBA and Unrivaled are competitors. This is not an extra league. This is not to make extra money. And the facing of the facts, the
Bring that
time
down.
has come.
Well, anytime you have competition, you're raising the bar, and you're challenging, and it's what it is, competition. And so I think it's going to force the WNBA to look at themselves and figure out what they can do better, and how to better the player experience. I really valued looking at Unrivaled and how I think intentional they were about ensuring that the players were taken care of. Because guess what? When you're a player and you're taken care of and you feel like your needs are met, you're being paid well, there's going to be some pretty good basketball. And
That's it right there. And you know what, folks? I'm bringing it to you and I'm letting you know, okay, this thing here, when you get into it and everything you got to deliver, okay, that needs to be delivered, okay, is not going to be the same, right? It's not going to happen. So now you got a situation where the WNBA is going to be forced, folks. They're going to be forced to change, Unrivaled. You got Gino. I've been telling you about Gino all along. I've been mentioning Gino. What's going on? You got Gino's players. UConn, okay, is leading the Unrivaled. And basically, if you look at it, all the players in the WNBA, there's only a few spots. I'll sprinkle a few spots outside of UConn, outside of South Carolina, outside of Baylor, and there's only a few coaches that really lead this up. If you really want to know, I mean, you're talking about Kim Mulkey, right? She's got a lot of players in the WNBA. You talk about Don Staley's got a lot of players in the WNBA. And you talk about Gino's got a lot of players in the WNBA, right? So you're facing this. And what does Candace Parker say? We're here to compete, right? And the women are on the other side of the table. And I told everybody this is the craziest thing I could ever hear anybody say, right? Is okay, how do you hold players accountable for business owners losing money? They have no decision making. They can't go in there and they cannot choose what it's going to be. And they've really competed against a conflict of interest. And here where it gets really serious because you got Adam Silver, okay, and you got Cathy Englebert, right? And so you're trying to put this thing together, you're collecting acquisition fees, you're doing team valuations, you're going on CNN Money, you're doing debt financing, you're doing everything you can to try to right the ship. You're trying to you're calling NBA owners. You got NBA owners doing things they don't normally do, right? Because why in the world would the NBA owner of the Sacramento Kings invest in the Portland franchise when you have Sacramento sitting right there? So you're scrambling now because Unrivaled's going to seize the weakness. They see the weakness and they're here to take advantage of the weakness. This is called corporate competition. And when you get into corporate competition, you get into Unrivaled, right? You got players, right? So you got to look at it. You got the two top players, all right, that played for the WNBA championship, right? Are competitors of the WNBA. And it's taken a while for everyone to look at Unrivaled, right? And this where it gets to Caitlyn Clark, right? Because you can't lose Caitlyn Clark. The WNBA cannot afford to lose Caitlin Clark. I don't care how you look at it. I don't care how you want to spin it. I don't care, right? But here's the deal. Now, as long as you got Caitlin, you're going to hold on to this attendance, right? But at the end of the day, Wall Street came to the table and said, "Hey, okay, we need valuations without Caitlin." So in actuality, it's better that Caitlin doesn't play in Unrivaled. And of course, the price tag's $5 million. That's what Ice Cube established, and it's still the established point, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, he's saying you can put Caitlyn in there for $5 million a year. We're going to pack the house anyway. But it's not just Caitlyn, right? Here's the deal: it's not just Caitlyn anymore. It's changed. A lot of things have changed around the WNBA, and you got to look at it, and you got to look at it differently because the WNBA is got a couple issues, right? They got a couple issues, and I'll show you right here. Okay, you can see Brink. Okay, you see you got Caitlin, you see Boston. Those are young players, right? Those are young players in the WNBA. There's no doubt about it. They're young. They could play the game. Caitlin's no doubt could set attendance records. You could do anything you want, right? But then on the other side, I'm gonna break this down so you really get it here. Then you got Kennedy Carter. Okay, that's the old regime, right? You're coming out of this old regime. Erica Wheeler right behind you, kind of see it peeking, right? That's an old regime. And the realness of it all, if you ask me, okay, the WNBA is too old. Too old. Players are too old, right? So it kind of works itself out. But and that's the wrong thing to say politically correctly because I'm not calling the women old as far as old because you can't call a woman old. But here's the difference I'm talking about. When you look at the players that have been playing in the WNBA, here's what put kind of hindered the WNBA. And I don't know if the WNBA realize it. The WNBA has been recycling the same players, right? So you got a group of 144 players and no one else can get in. It's like a secret league, right? Because all the coaches that were coaching in the WNBA, they just rerouted the players. And here's what the WNBA thought, or maybe they didn't, or maybe the coaches or whatever, how they felt. They finally said, okay, enough's enough. This league is not going to grow if you're just recycling the players, right? So what does that mean? If Chelsea Gray plays for 5 teams, Laney Hamilton playing for 5 teams, you basically have structured the league, recycled players, and the 144 you're watching, the people cannot watch the same players every year. That's why the NBA comes in with the splash and continuously growing because the NBA rookies that come in, they're going to take the league to the next level. The WNBA doesn't let anybody in, right? You got the same coaches picking the same players. So guess what? Nobody else, no other talent can come in. And I'll tell you, I'll be honest. I went and looked on the film, right? I looked at the top 10 ranked freshmen in college basketball. Every one of those top 10 can play in the WNBA today, right? So you got this 4-year rule holding you up, right? And at the end of the day, I mean, something's going to crack on this rule because you're losing the talent. If we'd have made John Morant wait 4 years to come in and play, okay, we'd have missed his best years, right? There's no doubt about it, right? So you got to look at that. Anthony Edwards, I mean, he stayed 4, but he had to get to the conference, the Final Four to get in the league, and ends up being the best player. The WNBA, there's better players. I could really tell you the WNBA and the NBA. The NBA is the age limits drop, right? When you get to 25 years old in the NBA, you're an old veteran. You're an old veteran. You've been in the G League. You've been in the league. You've been training. Okay, I mean, you've been already in it and you're old. By the time you get to 25, that's your peak point. Okay, you got players in the WNBA are playing well into their 30s, right? Well into their 30s. And that's too old. That's too old. The NBA now, they're training you in 16, 17, drafting you at 18, 19, and now you get a chance to have your career. 5 years, you're only 24 years old. If nobody hasn't noticed, okay, you look at all the veterans and you look at Charles Barkley and you look at LeBron. LeBron playing at 40, he may be the last player to play in the NBA at 40 years old because they're moved on for that. So you got to look at that and say, okay, here we go. Caitlyn was in danger. All these things about Caitlyn. But this is not about Caitlyn. This one's moving past Caitlyn, okay? And you got to understand something that these players, okay, are not responsible for the debt or the business failures of WNBA owners. That's not their accountability. Right now, if they felt that we're losing money and we're carrying you, well, you can't come on the other side because now you created a conflict of interest, and because you can't negotiate against yourself. Well, what are you saying, Mike? Well, I'm saying if, here you got the Money Mike City Kitty podcast, right? And then I go over and be a partner with somebody else, and I give them capital. Okay, now they give me 50%, so now I get a big contract, right? So I land $1 million contract. They said, okay, Money Mike, we love you. We're going to sign you up for $1 million, right? And I go across to the other side, and I'm saying, okay, of this $1 million, I'm gonna give you 500,000. Right? Sounds good in court. But at the end of the day, I'm taking 50% back. So I'm only giving you 250,000. And then I'm not going to carry any of your labor load, right? So you got to go ahead and take the lesser percentage, carry the labor load. We're going to deduct all the expenses and everything that we do. And then we're going to come to you with Delta, right? You got Delta puts his name on something, and Delta says, okay, the flights are going to be 50 million a year. Well, Delta makes. You know how many billions? I think Delta was like 50 billion. I mean, it's astronomical how much. So the flights that they're doing and the Delta and the name rights and image that they're allowed to profit from the WNBA, that's the winner, right? Because at the end of the day, what do you want to do? You want to say Caitlyn Clark flies Delta, right? So that gives them an edge over United and American Airlines, right? So that's why they did it. But at the end of the day, Candace Parker, man, oh man, did she drop a bombshell today? Yahoo Sports saying we're going to force these people to pay what they should be paying, and they can because they're not tied in. They're not sitting there holding breath. They are believing in themselves that hey, we got the players, and you know what? If it's kind of like the label. It's kind of like the music industry. I got a brother's in the music industry, and he could talk for hours on this. And you got Fat Joe's in the music industry, and he was talking about it too. And Fat Joe explained it out. He said, "Look, here's the deal. I could be with the label, which the WNBA is the label, right? That's the label. I could be with the label, and I can sell 20 million records, and then I can also go in there and I'm going to make about $2 million, whatever the number was, right? But he was always bringing it back. Says, well, wait a minute, from the distribution end, he was unaware they had to buy all of his music first. So the first 20 million was already bought, right? So that he's really selling 40 million is what Fat Joe was saying, right? But he said something very interesting. He said, you know what? I got to go over there with the label, which would be the WNBA, and I got to sell 4 million records to make $4 million, right? So that was how it worked. But when he went over and became an independent label, this is what Unrivaled saying, and they're making it real clear. When they go over and he became an independent label, now he only has to sell 250,000, right? Because the money that's coming in is not diluted, right? It's not being utilized, or it's not being uh, accounted, okay, in a labor load like, okay, we had to pay our employees and we had to pay this. And before you know it, you get down to the net. So you got a gross and you got a net income. Well, the Unrivaled League net income is coming directly to the players, right? So, and you got TNT, and TNT is coming in that lawsuit. So this thing here is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And at the end of the day, I don't know if it's a strategy, right? Because normally it's not a league. The NFL will not let two quarterbacks in the NFL, right? You're under the brand, you're under the shield. So for you to go out and say, okay, let's say Lamar Jackson, right? You got Lamar Jackson, and let's say you got Aaron Rodgers. Okay, they're not gonna NFL is not gonna let them go in the spring and play in a league, right? You're not going to have them playing in the USFL in the spring, okay? It's not going to happen, right? Because the players are under contract, okay? Nike's under contract, and this is where you get the freedom, right? Because if you got players that don't have a Nike contract, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, Asia Wilson, Nike contract, Delton Clark, Nike contract. So is the Unrivaled League a Nike league or Adidas league or Puma league? It's going to fall under one. New Balance, I don't care which one you pick in the shoe companies. It's either going to be a Nike league, which says, okay, we got a separate partner, because now what they want to do is make the Unrivaled the threat. So when they sit down at the negotiating table, they don't have to worry about money, because the Unrivaled can play from January till December, right? It can go all day long because it's only the beginning. And the way basketball games, if you grew up and as I did in the city of San Francisco in the Bay Area, the way basketball works, all the way from back to the concrete jungle, right? What do? You come in there and you get two guys playing one on one, right? and the two guys start out at 1-on-1, then a few more guys say, hey, you want to play 2-on-2? Before you know it, you go, okay, we'll play 3-on-3, right? Where the rival is, right? But then more people show up. And as more people keep showing up, right, then you're going to say, well, why don't we just play 5-on-5, right? And then it turns in, okay, who's got next? Who's going to be the next? Okay, because who's got next is going to be the next one when that team lose, right? So the Unrivaled can get players from anywhere, right? They got a different pool, okay, because they're not regulated by the WNBA. So if you got all the players overseas want to come over and they want to pay them, then the Unrivaled League can get all the players from. I mean, I'm going to tell you that this is going to happen, right? You get all players from Japan, you get all players from China. Now, of course, Adam Silver's not going to allow that, right? So he's got the reach to say, wait a minute, but this thing here, you got to look at it because it is now turning into something that's different, right? And you're coming out here with Candace Parker. Here's Chicago Sky. What a beautiful scene, right? 221, they won the championship. So Candace is not somebody that you just kind of throw around, but at the same time, the WNBA got a little too old, right? Because you got to bring in a young talent, and I get the ones that have been here forever. I mean, Diana Taurasi did more than anybody could ever do for this game, right? Brittany Griner did more, but it was a sad day for me to watch the Brittany Griner that I'm used to seeing running up and down the court for somebody to bring her back after non-activity, being in prison. That's a sad day, folks. And I didn't want to see that, but they did that, and that's the way it worked, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, you got to understand, you can't sit here and say sellouts when you all of a sudden you're going to talk about the Chicago Sky. Chicago Sky know how to pack an arena, right? There ain't no doubt about it. They ain't got no problem packing an arena because they're gonna get all the players. But you put the Unrivaled Chicago, right? Because eventually Unrivaled is going to start out as a little 3-on-3, and it's going to move into cities, right? And eventually their goal is like, Adam Silver. I mean, nobody wants to say it. I mean, it's the ABA versus the NBA, right? And the NBA wants to get to as at 32 teams. The WNBA wants to get at 32 teams, right? So you're going to build another league. Competition eventually has to merge, right? But in the meantime, man, there's a lot of stuff's going to go on. And I'm telling you folks something right now. This Unrivaled is going to be a league that's going to be different. It's not going to be what you expect. You got Candace Partner letting them know Unrivaled League will force, okay, read the writing on the wall. Unrivaled League will force the WNBA to figure out what they can do better, right? So now, what does the WNBA say on the other side? Well, we've only lost money. Well, too bad is what Candace Parker is saying. That's business, right? And you got to look at Candace Parker. She's been around the dance. Candace get on there with Shaq, Kitty, and all of them, man. She chop it up just like the men, right? So you can't really come here and say this is women's basketball when it come to Candace Parker, right? And all of these stars, right? Don't get me wrong. You got Caitlyn. Caitlyn could play basketball, right? But there's been a lot of women who have come into the WNBA that could do exactly what Caitlyn could do and also do more, right? So it's not that big of a difference, but you got quite a bit of following, okay, because of name, image, and likeness. So if you want to blame this problem that you have in the WNBA on anybody, blame it on women's college basketball. And when you blame it on women's college basketball, right here's what you got to remember: you got to pay to play, right? You can't have these women and you can't have them sitting here and you're getting their services for free, right? Because it doesn't work that way if you're gonna believe it. And I'm gonna tell you, you get the fooling around with Gino. Let me tell you something about Gino came in, took over when Pat Summit, and Candace Parker went to Tennessee, right? So Gino came on in after that, and Pat, things changed. Pat get the McDonald's All American, then Gino got them all, right? And then finally, Gino carried the torch for a while, and then here came Don Staley. Now she gets them all, right? And then you got Gino saying, okay, Don, what do we want to do, right? Because these coaches, these are high profile, right? And you talk about sponsors and TV contracts. They're gonna follow the high profile coaches. I try to tell everybody the high profile coaches is the way to go, right? Because you're gonna have to pay them, but they're gonna bring in more fans than the players you got, right? So now we move to the WNBA season is over. January Unrivaled kicks in. Now you got Cathy and you got Adam Silver, right? And you got Miss Jackson, right? Georgetown University alumna. So she's pushing the needle. The women know where they stand. You got Guma K talking about we got a product, and you got Cathy Englebert going, man, we're in trouble. So what do? They go to CNN, right? They go over there for a debt financing raise, right? Because at the end of the day, and understand the debt financing, folks, because I won't get into it, but I'll make it real simple. Debt financing, you go to people, Wall Street, who have made a lot of money. If you look at the stock market from 212 till today, it's bubbling over, right? So there's too much money in there. But now you need money. And they're not into your emotion. They're not into what type of property or what you do or how you do it. Okay. When they go to Adam Silver and they go to Cathy, they're giving you money to make money. Okay, period. And in fact, our money's preferred. So the money we give you, we want our money back before you even pay anybody else, right? Because you got to do it the Warren Buffett way, right? You got to do it that way because that's how you go to Warren, you go to Buffett, you get some money, right? $5 billion, $10 billion, whatever you need, right? But it's going to turn into preferred, and it's kind of like the Lehman Brothers, right? I'm not going to pay him $1 billion, just for borrowing the money. But now the WNBA doesn't have any choice. This thing's going to shake out, and I can tell you this: there's only one way that this thing's going to go, and it never changes. And that's what the Money Mike Syndicated Radio podcast is all about. We bring it to you before it happens. We're going to always tell you it's our opinion. Unrivaled here to stay. This is the competition. You saw the two in the NBA, WNBA championship, where you're going to see them in Unrivaled, and they're going to get it in. This one here, there's no plan, but I tell you what, Gino's always in the middle, and I'm telling you, he's going to stand for the player, and that's just the way it is. So you stay tuned. This is the Money Mike Syndicated Radio podcast. We're powered up by Fanatics. We got gear, we got everything, but the WNBA and Unrivaled are about to have a big old-fashioned fight. And okay, Corral, so Caitlyn, Clark, Wyatt Earp, who's going to be Doc Holliday? That's what I want to know. We'll see you soon.